Hi Lisa, I was very triggered by your response to my question on Sunday. I'm wondering if experiencing, this is from Ian, I'm wondering if experiencing and eventually seeing through triggers can relate or lead to an energetic shift, or is it, if it has nothing to do with it, should we be treated separately? So there can be two types of triggers. There can be triggers, just natural triggers that happen. So somebody crosses your boundary, or somebody's being inappropriate, or it collides with your conditioning, so your current conditioning and genetic makeup. Or there can be another trigger where you feel like you as an entity that's moving through time has been attacked, and then you try to rectify that through seeking. And that's what we're targeting in these talks, or that's what we're looking at in these talks. So nothing can get you to non-duality, it's grace. Even though everything is grace, you can't really separate it out. Just in terms of words, it's easiest for me to say it's grace. That shift will happen when it happens. But when you're deeply seeking and deeply identified and deeply caught in the stories of you, it's impossible to hear the beauty of this moment. Like, so if I went out to somebody on the street that's totally involved in their life and I started telling them about how wonderful this moment was and that this is all there is, they wouldn't even be able to hear it. They would most probably feel insulted and get angry with me. So what seems to need to happen on the human level is an investigation of these triggers, an investigation of this deep suffering, so that something else can be heard. It's like there is this pure being that's here, that's everywhere. But when you're totally identified and really heavily identified, you're just focused on this narrow portion of experience, this story called you. And you're just totally like looking and seeing everything through that. So unpicking that and undoing that relaxes it. So there's not such a contraction. And then at some point what will happen is there'll be a shift to who you truly are. It's not that undoing you leads you to non-duality, because non-duality is always here. It's always this moment. You never left non-duality. But the cloud of you that seems to be like blocking the sun can be worked on and explored. And I recommend that I recommend to do that while listening to non-duality, because otherwise it's impossible to hear non-duality. You'll be insulted and you'll think, fuck off. That's really, like, how dare you say that this moment is everything and this moment is everything you look for. Does she not know what problems I have? So first of all, like looking at it to undo that reactivity so you can begin to hear the bigger picture. But it's not you that hears it, it's just these clouds, these dense clouds that seem to block the view, but you're always in non-duality. The next reason is I think that the kindest thing that anyone can do for humanity is to always continuously work on themselves and work on their reactions and work on their triggers and get to know themselves. So on the human level, the nicest thing you can do, and one of the greatest things that all of us can do, is to always expand our limited conditioned responses. And that's an ongoing process that will be endless for me, for anybody, because society and our conditions are always changing. So you can always open up to something bigger and more expanded than you. Knowledge is infinite. Your condition and your ways of reactions are infinite. This world is infinite. It reflects it back in all the details of life. I can't even remember what I responded to you last time. But anyway, there was a reactivity that happened. So yes, I would look at it. If it really lasted like a long time, I would look at what it is going on there. Aren't you interested? I mean, whenever I get a pain from something, I'm fascinated as to why that is the case and what's happening. Aren't you interested as to why it triggered you so much? The problem with non-duality, I love non-duality and I love talking about it, is that, like I was speaking to a friend the other day, and when we were younger we used to explore this subject together, and she didn't explore it that much, and she felt like she understood and worked on herself to an extent, and she's got difficulties coming up now. And when I tried to point her back more to her conditioning, her response was, yeah, but I've done all that. And the problem with non-duality is that, you know, because you've investigated your personality structure and your conditioning, and it doesn't easily change, it's like an endless process changing your conditioning. There is this easy mentality that comes with non-duality that you don't need to explore that anymore, or that you shouldn't explore that anymore, or that you're done with that. Whereas really, it's an endless process because you're always getting reconditioned, and your conditioning is deep in your psychology, and the human condition is like deep embedded in our DNA. Because you're not only releasing your conditioning, you're also releasing all your ancestors' conditioning, and it's deeply embedded. And it's an endless process. Like, you endlessly have to look at it and the way you're relating to the world. So whenever I have a pain come up, I look at where the pain is in the chakra and where it comes from in the past, you know, where I've learned that condition, where I've learned that conditioned response in my childhood. And then I look at it, how it's affecting that situation. And that's something that never ends. You've got to get used to always doing that. That's the polite human thing to do when you're alive. To endlessly see your reactions. If everybody always talks about in non-duality, like world peace, if that's what people want, like to live together more harmoniously, then you're always going to have to be committed to looking at your conditioned responses, because we are creatures of habit, and it's not like you just learn it and you know it and it goes away. There's something that you work with through your whole life creatively. Non-duality, or seeking, so separation, is the belief that those conditioned responses are you, and that those conditioned responses are one day going to become enlightened. And that's when people spend their whole life waiting to become enlightened, because they're waiting to become a perfect human, and nobody does. That's also when you get involved in dangerous cults or something, because when the guru teaches you that he's beyond or she's beyond all their conditioning, which is a lie. No one can get completely over all their conditioning. You're always going to be conditioned, and you can always expand to a greater level in the way that you think or the way that you see the world. But that's not who you are, and there isn't someone that becomes enlightened. That is a response that's happening in the moment. What becomes enlightened is that which is in the background experiencing itself, but it's actually in the foreground as well, but it feels like it's in the background behind the personality. It swaps over and it becomes everything. Like, you walk around and you're in yourself, you're not separate, and in that a personality structure arises. Liking this or disliking that, or being reactive to this or being reactive to that. When you're identified with it, then you're always seeking to find your relief, to find that expansion in behaving nicely, in having certain responses, in not being triggered, in your chakras always having a perfect experience. And to me, that's impossible to be that on the human level. At first, when you get into this subject, you need to deal with this heavy, conditioned self in order to relax it to an extent. And then at some point, when you keep repetitively listening to this subject, a shift will happen, an energetic shift. And then after that, you still keep working on your fucking shit. Any polite, decent, empathetic human carries on working on their shit. It's only polite to do that, especially when you socialize with other people. All of us can be pains in the asses as humans. All of us, every single one of us, can be too pedantic about the washing up or the cleanliness or how much noise your neighbor makes or who did this or who said that, or blah, 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 blah. This idea of a perfect human, that one day you're going to come perfect, and when somebody's making too much noise and you don't like it, that's the right response because you're enlightened and you know the level of music that should be listened to. It's nonsense. That's never going to happen. You're going to get irritable, and then you're going to go and try and negotiate with the people to turn the music down, and then the people next door will think, what an asshole. What a stuck-up asshole. And then in your head, you're like, no, I'm enlightened. I'm enlightened. I'm not an asshole. I'm enlightened.